Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of Nuggets of Wisdom. We hope you had a wonderful week. Zena, how's it going?
It's going good. It's going good. How was your week going so far?
It's actually pretty quiet. I heard
Okay.
I heard you've been pretty busy.
Yeah, it's midterms and yep, paperwork.
Nice, nice. Well, hopefully it'll be over soon.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, winter break is coming soon, so here's to hoping.
So in today's episode, we have a special guest speaker, Ringo.
Oh yeah,
He's
I was like, who's
Zena's
in
like,
my
who?
mouth? Wait. Yeah, he's that little cutie
um,
pie.
so in today's episode, we will be talking about boundaries.
Yep.
Why do we need boundaries? Why are boundaries such an important component of healthy and harmonious relationships?
Yeah.
So Zaina, when I was preparing for this episode, I started reflecting, on my adult life, and
I'm a childhood too.
and so I know I see myself as somebody who's very diplomatic.
Okay.
And I did my master's in conflict resolution,
Okay.
and I realized that part of it is because I dislike conflict so much. And I
Yeah.
like to avoid conflict to the best of my ability.
That I took my master's.
To the level where I did my master's in that. No, to be honest, I thought that being diplomatic and avoiding conflict is actually the strongest boundary to have. And
Yeah.
but
All right. Yeah.
reflecting on it, I realized it's not such a strong boundary. It could be an avoidance mechanism. So I really want us to start off this episode by going into why are boundaries so important? Why do we need them in our personal and professional lives? Why are they good for us, and why avoiding boundaries or disregarding them can actually do more harm to us than good?
Okay. My personal relationship with boundaries, which I'm still trying to figure out, honestly, like, uh, is I learned that from my job. I remember when we're doing class management and how, like, me learning about classroom management and how to make sure that your classroom doesn't end in chaos and what do you do if it. So I remember my boss telling me, and I loved how she did that. Usually, whenever we start the year, we usually start with focusing on the rules, focusing on what is acceptable, what's not acceptable, and what will happen if you're doing the right thing. What will happen if you're doing the unacceptable thing regarding the classroom, and why are these rules so important? And we usually take like almost like 2 weeks to a month making sure that like the kids understand it, we understand it, and we're implementing it very, very meticulously in that first month. And I remember my first time teaching, I was like, what's the problem? Like, I didn't see why like this lesson could be taught in 2 days. I like, why should I have it in a month? Like, I don't understand the background behind it. And later on in the year, I found out that my class would fall apart easily. Like getting them to have it, like to get their attention, to make sure that they're doing what they need to do. It was a tough job at the end of the year. So I remember my boss telling me, she's like, if you have done it this in a month, this problem would not have occurred later on because during that month,
if you had established boundaries within the first month.
But yes, that problem you would just hit the ground running, and the class would know exactly what is needed and what's not needed. We're not just labeling that yeah. So for me, this is where like, oh, I get it. Like this was a light bulb in my head where like it's very important whenever you're dealing with anything new to establish your boundaries. What is acceptable for you? What is acceptable when it comes to your job or your relationships or whatever it is? What is acceptable for you? Because later on, if you compromise these boundaries, it will turn in chaos, which I think my classroom is the perfect example of that.
So I love that you said that. So how do we know, Zaina, that we have boundaries established in the first place? How do we know that we have strong boundaries?
That's a good question. How do you know that we have a boundary in the first place? And I usually go with my feeling towards it. For example, if someone asked me, like, if my friend wanted to call me, all right, or wanted to have a conversation, or wanted to go out, or whatever, and in that moment, I'm not like, I want to go, but I'm not really feeling it. I would rather like, and I still went. That means my boundaries are not in the right place. Like I'm putting my others and like regardless of my like myself is second and others are first. And this
So,
is a
so
problem.
you dismiss that inner feeling, you're tired, you're not up to it,
Yes.
to
Yeah.
essentially people please, and we do that a lot in our lives.
Yeah, yeah. And one of the side effects is people pleasing and authority pleasing and let's just want it to fit in no matter what. And these are like uh, for example, there's a difference between going out because I want to help out my friends
Mm-hmm.
even though I'm tired. Like this has like a more holistic, more appropriate view rather than me going out because my friend told me to and I'm not feeling it. So yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. Like knowing your boundaries, knowing where you're putting yourself first and realizing what exactly do you need at this moment. Do you need to rest? Do you need to go out? Do you need to rest? But for example, your priorities are taking care of your mom at that moment. So you just have the inner conversation with yourself, more or less.
I love that. And I think we will go over how to establish boundaries with yourself. And part of it is being really honest
Yeah.
with your needs and your energy levels. But um, let's go over the difference between having a strong internal and a strong external boundary.
Like a strong internal boundary and a strong external boundary.
Mm-hmm. Or what
That's
are
a good
they?
question.
Because it's not enough to establish an external boundary, right?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So let's go back to the friend situation.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, for example, the external, for me, how I would visualize it is that internally, like, I don't want to go out. All right. But externally, um, I went out regardless. So my external
Okay.
boundary and my internal boundaries are not on the same side. This is
Okay.
how would I explain it. All right.
Yeah.
How would that be opposite? For example, external. For example, what's it called? When I go external, like for example, externally, for example, I want to run in the store screaming, but internally, I know that this is inappropriate, and I'm holding myself like very tough on myself. Like, no, you're not gonna break down. You're gonna do this, and you're gonna finish this almost in a tough kind of way. Then that kind of externally you're doing something, but internally there's something else going on.
So it's
So
kind of like
internally
a clash between your inner voice and your outer
and
behavior.
what your action more exactly.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
fascinating. I didn't think of it that way.
I don't know. This is how I don't know if it makes sense. I would love to see your
It,
viewpoint on
it
that.
does. It
Yeah.
does, because one time I was telling my aunt something, and she's like, even though you said no to someone who's really bothering you internally, your boundary wasn't so strong. That's why the
Exactly.
situation kept happening, because you weren't really
Yeah.
you weren't feeling confident about your decision. Even though you told
Yeah.
that person no, internally you were still feeling indecisive about it.
You see a lot of these like if with pet trainers, if they're not like and like no means no and internally they mean it and externally they're doing the no as well,
They
they're the
sense
cat
that.
or the dog, they will not listen to you.
I agree.
Yeah, or people too. Yeah.
uh, so I guess before we walk through the process of establishing boundaries, I guess we should
Yeah.
remind ourselves that it's not an easy process. It's it's okay to feel vulnerable when it comes to boundaries. It
Yeah.
requires high levels of honesty with yourself and
Especially,
others,
yep. Yeah, yeah.
and also
And
a high level of
even
acceptance too.
That's true. That's true. And it's okay to realize that now that I've established my boundaries and I'm getting to know them, it's okay. Like if you felt like yourself getting more angry at that time and feeling like you're against the entire world, it's fine. But you need to realize that you more or less are responsible for the system that you're in. You're the one that didn't have a strong boundary. So you need to accept people around you adjusting to your new boundaries. Some people might want you to go back to your other self or your past self. Some people would like, what's going on? Some people might leave you. Some people might. So it's just have patience with yourselves. And if you feel like this boundary is helping you, then, yeah.
So it's patience, it's acceptance, but it's also awareness. So
Yep.
Being able to identify. So when people notice that shift, they may not necessarily notice that shift, consciously.
Yeah.
Just be aware that, there's just something is happening there, that people are finding your behavior a little strange. They're not used to that. But also be aware of the boundary that you established for yourself. Because it's one of the most precious boundaries are one of the most precious gifts we can give to ourselves to protect our internal world.
That shows self-worth. Like that entire thing, like how do you view yourself? How do you view your self-worth? How do you view, like, imagine a house. Like, for example, would you let anyone inside your house, or would you let anyone inside your room, or would you let anyone like getting into your bank account, basically? Like, what who would you give access to your life? And exactly with these boundaries.
That's, I guess, one of the dangers of not establishing boundaries, and how we can harm ourselves. If we consistently say yes to something and we want to say no, or if we hesitate or shy away from having honest conversations with people about what we like and what we dislike. So this is a perfect segue to how do we establish boundaries. And you sort of did touch on this with your story about, wanting to go out or not wanting to go out, I guess. So the first thing is to be comfortable with saying no.
Be more comfortable with saying no. But being more comfortable with saying no comes from accepting yourself. And I think this is a theme that goes on like throughout our 6 episodes. We're constantly saying you have to accept yourself and you have to be friends with yourself. So treat yourself as a guest. I think someone told me that before. Always treat yourself as a guest, as if someone is visiting you. And you need to establish, first of all, you need to establish that connection with yourself. Because lack of boundaries may be a lack of communication within yourself. So you need to establish that connection. How to establish this connection? You just go to the mirror and talk to yourself. See what brings you comfort, what doesn't bring you comfort, and most importantly, be honest. Be honest with yourself and accept it. Even if you saw something that you're doing that may not be appropriate, or you feel like it's wrong, or you feel like you don't like it, doesn't represent you, accept it. You need to accept that and move on from that. Yeah.
And it builds empathy too.
Yeah. And it also builds acceptance to others, because if someone did something that, for example, let's go back to the classroom management thing. If a student did something that was inappropriate or had negative consequences, he knows his consequences and he's up for that, and and he knows his responsibilities. Like, oh, I know that I missed my homework today. If I didn't bring it tomorrow, Ms. Zaina will give me a 0, for example. She'll give me a half the grade of it, for example. All right. So if I'm late with my homework, this will happen. He will not hate me, and I will be like, oh my God, look at that lazy student. What is he doing? Why is he's constantly being late? No, he's having an off day. I will accept him more, and that doesn't mean that he's having a negative consequences, that I hate him, or I hate or that he's a bad student. He knows his consequences, and in return, he knows what he has to do to fix it. And this is very important, that clear communication between not only you but with other people, and accepting them.
So I guess this is the second way to establish boundaries, not only to be honest with yourself, but become more comfortable with having these, honest, vulnerable, conversations with others.
And
appreciate the necessity of them too. I guess a good example of this would be, and this is something that I'm still practicing or getting, more comfortable with, is when somebody reaches out to you, a dear
Mm-hmm.
friend, and they want to vent.
Yeah.
They're having a hard day and they really need to talk to you. So
Yeah.
it made me think of, how do we reach out to someone, ask them respectfully if they're available to talk, while also being mindful of their time and energy levels, because we don't want
Mm-hmm.
to tread on that territory of emotional dumping, because that could be a violation of a boundary, right?
Yeah, if it's your boundary that, for example, I don't people I need to surround myself with people who would lift me up and support me, and like I know my boundaries clear enough, then yeah, if you feel like this is a threat to your boundary, by all means you need to be like, hey, I don't think I'm available. You can say it nicely, decline nicely. I
Exactly.
don't think I'm available. Can we schedule? Maybe are you free, for example, 1 year is your free time, and we can reschedule and see with my free time. It depends in obviously on the situation, but because I always fell in that trap a lot, and I sadly, unfortunately, I kind of I this is the main problem that I'm finding right now with friendships. And my friend fears like my friend recently told me, Zayn, I think you have a problem of being someone using you. And I and I remember like this has been a constant problem I'm trying to solve, which and I found the easiest way for me to solve it is changing your intention with that person.
Mm-hmm.
For me, for example, the intention here, rather than listening to someone, being forced to listen to someone, actually helping another human being or
So
whatever.
just rephrase that a little bit. So you mean, if
Yeah,
instead of being that person that just listens no matter what you tell me,
yeah.
you
No, what I mean is that if that person is reaching out to you and
Mhm.
you're not feeling it, but for example, you know that person needs help, and you know this for a fact, like you know this for a fact. So rather than feeling being in that position where you're stuck listening to that person, change that mentality a little bit, in which changing your intention behind it, be like, hey, I think that person needs help. How about I help them out, or whatever feels, whatever. Like I know helping people, like it's a good thing to help people, so why not help them? And if you're not like, for me this helps, for example, you can rechange it to whatever intention that you're currently trying to feel. For example, you're feeling for example, I don't know, this is the only example that came to my mind, but at the end of the day, if you don't want to it, then you shouldn't do it.
You shouldn't do it. Yeah. And I think that if you're the person, seeking, you needing somebody to talk to, you can simply say, hey, I've had a rough day, are you available? So limit it to a time frame.
Yeah,
Are you
yeah.
available for like 20 minutes? I just really need to talk it through with someone. And if you don't feel emotionally available, if you're feeling energetically low, if you're the person on the receiving end, you can
Yeah,
simply say, hey, I'm not in the right headspace right now, can we talk
yeah,
later? It could
yep,
be as simple as that.
simple as that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So in a way, you're protecting your boundary, you're
yeah,
respecting yourself, because you also don't want to pour from an empty cup,
true.
but you're helping, that person.
And even if your cup is full and you're not feeling it still,
Don't force
that's
yourself.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, it's fascinating because it does happen quite a lot in friendships, where we feel
Especially
bad
friend.
and guilty
Yeah,
if we, you know, ignore that text message or don't respond right away. Or
yeah. Someone, I think, I just overheard this, and someone said like guilt and feeling guilty all the time was also a disrespect for you, because you're disrespecting your decisions and
mhm,
your
mhm.
choices. So even if you don't agree with them, like I know that ignoring that text from my friend is a bad thing, uh, but on whose code is it a bad thing? Whose code is it? Is it
Yeah.
your code, the society's code, the friend's code? Because this is what I hate. Like some people mislabel what is a friend and what is this is a yeah. I feel like a lot of people mislabel a lot of things in their life, and they need to. And this is because of boundaries, because they want to be like, hey, I didn't mean to joke, or I didn't mean to ignore you. I just had a busy day. Well, okay, but on the other end, I have more or less, if I said like, what I'm trying to say is that we tend to mislabel a lot of things, especially when it comes to friendships and relationships.
And this, brings up the importance of inner reflection. Just
Yeah,
you sitting yourself and reflecting on what is a boundary to you, what
yeah,
matters to you.
yeah. You're the captain.
Exactly.
Who's the crew are you gonna let in? Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. Because if you don't do that, boundaries will crumble easily, or
yep,
you will be in that seesaw moment every second of your life, and
yeah.
it'll make relationships really difficult for you.
Uh, yeah, and even just communicating with people sometimes, like you're in the store and like the storyteller, like you didn't like how they communicated with you, can easily say like, hey, can you not do that? Like, this is a form of self-respect to yourself. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
if you were in a store and they're playing the music too loud, and you know it's your right to go down and tell them, hey, can you lower the music down? If you feel like it's your right to do that, obviously with keeping in mind, like, we're not trying to be like, hey, go. Self-respect doesn't mean that you're alienating everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
Self-respect means that you're respecting yourself, and the more that you respect yourself, you're going to respect other people's boundaries. This is what we're trying to establish, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And I think one of the dangers of not expressing your boundaries clearly is that it can build resentment.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you
Lots of it.
voice how you feel on the spot, or if you feel comfortable doing that, having these honest and sincere conversations politely, you don't want to be, hurtful to the other person.
Yeah.
You'll sleep at night with a calm heart, because you know that in a, at least you put yourself first, while also being mindful of others and respectful of
And
their
if that
time.
person did not understand what you're trying to say and communicate in that moment, in that spot, and maybe that person decided to gaslight you entirely,
Mm-hmm.
then be like, then you should not listen to that. Be like, oh, maybe he meant that, or maybe if you felt it, then it's true. Like,
if,
always trust your emotions.
mm-hmm. If you felt
Yeah.
that you did the right thing, that if it
Yeah. Now,
feels
for
right, that
example, if you felt like the person in front of you did something bad and you didn't like what they did, or they did something good, or whatever it is that you're trying to communicate with that other person, and that person's like, no, I didn't mean anything by it. If you felt it, and that he did something bad or she did something bad, then you need to trust your intuition, more or less. You need to trust your emotions. And if they decided to gaslight you and be like, hey, I didn't do anything, I don't know what you're talking about, or whatever, and then you need to be aware of that. Then you need to decide, do I want to keep this person in my life or not? Do you get what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, no, it makes me just think of
Lots of situations.
lots of situations, but also how we grow.
Yeah.
The more you grow and the more you venture into self-discovery and inner awareness, the more the
Yeah.
theme of boundaries comes up, and you see them highlighted in every single relationship. You begin
Yeah, it's a
of
repeated
these
pattern.
exactly, and you begin to think of
Yeah.
the nuances.
Yeah.
It's actually a fascinating shift in a person's growth process when you begin
Yeah.
to reflect on boundaries, what matters to you. It's not, from a selfish perspective. It's also because you want your relationships to be healthy. You want them to be harmonious. You want them to be, I don't know, flowing, I guess.
From my teaching experience, I feel like the create like having a good classroom equals having clear rules,
Mm-hmm.
clear rules. You will not, that doesn't mean that they'll be sitting on their desk doing nothing all the time and just sitting there. That doesn't mean like I don't have a flowing classroom and I don't love my kids. No, for this is comfortable for both of us. And
Mm-hmm.
this is I feel like I never enjoyed teaching as much as I ever did while having clear rules, not only for my students, and also for myself. I feel like this really this equals a lot of people, and if people like having clear boundaries with yourself and knowing exactly what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, you're automatically gonna attract the right people to that will harmoniously interact with your boundaries. So just live your boundaries.
Yeah, yeah. And I know in
Yeah.
today's conversations, we sort of focus on our personal relationships, but this also translates to our professional lives, how we
True.
deal with, a work task, how we
Hmm.
communicate with our bosses, how we communicate
Yeah.
with our coworkers. I know yesterday you brought up an example of taking work home, and you kind of
Yeah.
did mention the whole issue of boundaries.
Yeah, I like I go to my like when I started boundaries, I used to okay, my job wants me to be there at 7:45 to 2:30. All
Hmm.
right, so I'm gonna focus all my effort, all my doings from 7:45 to 2:30. If I decided to take my work home because there's a deadline that I need to meet, it's not because I'm forced to do that, or it's not because the school's asking me to do that, and this is not normal. It's because I just want to finish my work earlier rather than because I want to be on time rather than but that doesn't mean that I'm crossing any boundaries, just shifting that rather than be like, oh my God, this is the normal, take my work home with me. Because it's not
Yeah,
normal.
and I guess it's okay to be flexible with in professional settings. Sometimes situations do
All right.
mitigate you. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I love that.
Fortunately.
It's
Yeah.
it's such a deep boundaries is such a yeah. We can have hours and hours of conversations in on this.
No,
Um,
and I just yeah, we could have lots of ideas about, especially with language, and you can relate it to words and what do they mean to each. Like
mhm.
the list is endless with boundaries.
So I know
Yeah,
it sounds like also to to our audience, it sounds like it's
yeah,
something that's big and so difficult, but sometimes you can um, it can feel uncomfortable to express something, a simple phrase such as no, I'm not up to it today, can we do this
yeah,
later? But
yeah,
you're actually buying yourself a lot of peace,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
you'll
yeah, yeah.
notice that in your energy level. If you
Yep.
constantly say yes to something and you want to say no, you'll end up feeling down most of the time in the long run, while at the
And
same
even if
time, if you say no when you really want to say no, you'll actually notice that you become more present. Your
yeah,
energy becomes, you learn to channel your energy in a healthier way.
yep. Yeah, I think I don't remember who to I have a lot of nuggets from people around me. I need to record them and give them credit for. Someone I think once told me, I think I don't know who, but they told me uh, like stand up for yourself. So when you're weak, yourself will stand up for you. And I
Oh,
feel
I
like
love
this,
that.
yeah. And I think I don't know who told. I wish I can remember who said that. And I this really changed a lot of my perspective. Be like, that's true. I need to give myself credit and stand up for myself when I'm feeling victorious or I'm feeling like strong. Because when I'm going through my down phase, myself will stand up for me more. And I
I
feel like
love
this is
that.
very
I
important
love that.
with boundaries.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think this is a
Mm.
perfect conclusion to
Thick
our
and
episode.
yeah, I
Yeah,
know.
because
Yeah.
it's you really need to give yourself credit, a pat on the back when
Yeah.
you do this, when you stand up yourself for yourself, because you're honoring yourself.
Yep.
You're
Yeah.
honoring your being, your truth, who you are. So I love this.
Even if you don't resonate consciously with it right now, but accept it. It's just like a little child. Just accept it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Be kind to your inner child.
Yeah, be kind to yourself and whatever systems are inside of you.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Such a beautiful conversation.
Yeah.
So I guess this wraps it up for this week's episode of Nuggets of Wisdom. I forgot to
Yeah.
mention that we're super thankful for those of you that reached out to us with feedback on our podcast. We sincerely appreciate it, and we do take it
Thank
into
you.
consideration. And we did have a conversation about it. So thank you so much
Yeah.
for that.
Yeah.
Please do share the podcast with your friends, with your family. Click like and subscribe, and we will see
Yep.
you next week. Bye bye, everyone.
Bye, guys.